It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect each other.
Nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Aho Ashe.
Ashe.
It's time to recognize the radical among us. Radicals represent reforms and change for the people, by the people. They hold strong convictions close and advocate for fundamental transformation with direct action, often putting their minds, bodies, and spirits on the line for true justice. This is RAD AF, a podcast that amplifies the stories of our Long Beach area radical change makers. This year, we talk to radical women, the community organizers, grassroots movement builders, and leaders who give a fuck about mobilizing people power to make positive change in the community. The revolution might not be televised, but you sure can find a way to join it online or in person in a neighborhood near you. Let's go. Here we are in our first episode of RAD AF. I'm Melissa Morgan with Long Beach Forward, and with me is
Diana Martinez, also from Long Beach Forward.
We're super excited to have two incredible guests with us from KGA, Kamai Girls in Action. We've got Lian and Joy, and are really looking forward to hearing about these women, their stories, their journey to the work that they do in community-based organizing and movement building. So welcome, Lian. Welcome, Joy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Hello. Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
So glad you're here. Tell us who you are and the work that you do, and just what's your role at KGA. Lian?
Yeah, hi, everyone. Lian Chen, she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director at Kamai Girls in Action. I have now, oh my goodness, been at this organization for about a decade. Time just really flew by. But I came in youth organizing work actually as a young person. My family, when we left Cambodia, in our journey, we ended up resettling in the Bay Area in Oakland, California, which is where I grew up. And we had family members kind of spread out, and we settled in different parts of the U.S., including some folks down here in Long Beach. And so I've been very familiar with Long Beach and learned about KGA when I was starting out as a youth organizer in Oakland. And some of my very first campaign that I did in Oakland included stopping a youth curfew, which the city of Oakland at that time wanted to invest millions of dollars in having street cops sweeping up young people if they were out on the streets after a certain period of time. And that was the worst, in my opinion, worst use of money, when we could reinvest that money back into a lot of the youth program and services that was being cut at that time. And so that was my very first introduction into youth organizing, into building power, into cultivating the interest and the voices of young people in my community. And I grew up in the housing projects in Oakland, very kind of like working class, poor, Black, brown, Southeast Asian community. And so, and then just, coming full circle back to KGA, still at the same place almost, but in different location. Organizing in low income, like central Long Beach, which is one of the area in the city that has a lot of working class families, Black, brown, Southeast Asian, and a lot of common interests. And so that's a little bit about who I am and how I got into this work. And I'm really excited to be talking to you all today I'm going to pass it to Joy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joy. My pronouns are she and her, and I work with My Girls in Action. I am the communications director, and I first started KGA back in 2007 by way of a roommate or a housemate in Oakland who was working with a youth organization called APAL. So they sent me the job opening, and I applied. And at that time, I, just finished an internship with the Center for Third World Organizing, also based in Oakland. I think after school, I really felt like I needed some hands-on training to find solutions to the problems that I learned about in school. And so at that point, I was ready to go home and bring the skill sets that I learned on my journey. And so here I am at KGA, and I think some of the background that really pushed me into the spaces of both organizing and like learning histories and creating new history and making like new possibilities is just not really learning. And I think this is also common with the young people that that are in our program, is really learning about the histories of why we are here. I think those stories are not always shared or told. And for my family members, my household was quite diverse in the sense that I had family members with different abilities. And I think that shaped my perspective in understanding advocacy and at a very early age. Growing up with a father who was paraplegic, and then also seeing how that dynamic shaped my mom and my sister's role in the household as women, definitely showed me like the role that women do take on as, at a young age for my sister as breadwinners, but also in, just sustaining the family. So I think with that, and, coupled with wanting to know about how we got here, took me back to the journey in the Philippines, which, brought me back to the work at C2. And when I got placed in New Orleans, that's really when I started to understand why it's so important to organize and build power here in the States. I think up until that point, and even now, I definitely have solidarity for the movement work happening in the Philippines. But all that is to say is that I understood, how race is like a driving factor and a driving force. And the South is definitely a place where deep organizing and power needs to be built. But, all in all, I think, through those experiences, I was able to take that with me and continue to build a KGA. So I know that was a lot, but it really is a full circle journey and like a heartfelt journey of how I got here. And I bring that up too because Lian also worked at C2, so she definitely has roots there. And although we never met there, we met somehow. I think we were meant to cross paths. So after Lian's trip to Southeast Asia, which for her was a full circle journey that, she wanted to travel the Mekong River, also understand the roots of her family. And it was just such a personal journey. And you can talk about that, if you'd like, Lian. But I just remember you sharing how powerful it was to be on that journey on your own. And and then, I think she came back and we were working with LA Can, also tackling homelessness in LA and gentrification. And so Lian was running a training, like a weekender training on like the tactics and door knocking, like a community activist training, I think it was. And so I met her there and I said, well, you're Lian, you're the program director I never got to meet in Oakland because you were in Southeast Asia. It was great to meet you. She's like, yeah, let's go grab some lunch after. I was like, all right, cool. And so I said, this is great because we're in need of staff at KGA, and I think she would play an awesome role. We were looking for a program director. And anyway, so we met over tacos and I got to meet Lian's partner, Jeb, and I'm so glad Jeb was here doing school, because that's how Lian was here in the first place. So if our partner wasn't here, doing school, then we would never had tacos, and we never had this conversation of, hey, do you want to come work at KGA? So it worked out.
Hey, it's all about the tacos and the food. You can bond. You can definitely bond over food.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, that's so interesting that you both worked at the same place and these connections. I love that. And now full circle coming back. In this series of podcasts, we're calling it RAD AF, which stands for Radical as you know what, F. We're really focusing on women as caretakers of our communities, unsung heroes. We're going to be looking for who are the women out there doing a lot of heavy lifting to make real societal change. And we want to reflect on womanhood and growing up as girls. What did we see? What did we experience? So for me, I'm thinking back, one of my first memories as a kid, realizing I was a girl, was noticing how the men and the women would separate themselves in family functions. Family functions were always really important. So I found myself doing the dishes in the kitchen and, listening to the women talking about what's going on in the families and the family dynamics, while the men were in another room, a little bit more relaxed, probably a beer in hand, watching football or something. What was one of your first memories when you realized you were a girl?
I came to this country as a refugee child, so all my childhood memories has been shaped by that experience of trauma and compounded trauma of the genocide, of flight, and the resettlement, and then all the internalized stuff that comes with that type of childhood, and then just the intense poverty and the compounded trauma that exists growing up in inner city. And so my early memories of just being a girl is I think there's a lot of the typical, but then there's also the ridiculous. So I mean, some of the typical stuff is just like gender roles are so pronounced, in the sense that as young women and as girls, we are expected. We are our brother's keeper, and we're also our sister's keepers. So we take care of each other, and we take care of the family, and we hold up our men. Even at times when they are the one who are abusing us. So there's just a lot of challenging dynamic, both in the family as well as in the community. And I think for me growing up, just the piece around gender role in the household has a lot to do both with chores, but also with tiptoeing, tiptoeing and feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. Not wanting to piss off, men in the family. And then there's also the dynamic of PTSD, the dynamic of mental health and chronic stress and trauma. That is a part of the refugee experience that really, I think, add another dimension to some of the gender roles, and how we need to how our social emotional health is so tied to some of that stuff. And I think it plays out, in a very, it's really hard, but it's also very nuanced, because it's combined with the intensity of post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic stress. And then also drug abuse and alcohol abuse and addiction that comes with how do folks then deal with the trauma and the stress that they're dealing with. And so there's a lot of the interconnectedness with all those things. And I think gender role really plays out in that. And I think some of the toxic masculinity and the misogyny, they intensify under those type of conditions. And, you know, and to me, like, I just have so much love and care for, you know, all the folks in my household, my extended household, and in the community. But also simultaneously, it's very, very difficult for women to hold all that emotional labor because while we're also going through so much, we're also caretaking and we're worrying about, you know, how those who might be suffering from PTSD or mental health challenges in our community, especially our men, you know, how are they going to hold up? And then there's also because of state violence, because a lot of the men in our community are subject to deportation orders. There's also this layer of stress around, you know, our family going to stay together? Are we gonna, you know, lose our breadwinner in the family? You know, and so there's all these layers of like internalized stuff and how we caretake for ourselves, but then also for others. So I do feel like it's a very complicated. It's a very question. Yeah, it's a very complicated question, and there's a lot of nuance to it. But with that said, it's just very, very important to model strong female leadership and identify kind of like space and leadership space is really important for young girls and women. And the fact that, like, you know, sisterhood, the building of sisterhood, so that we could lean on each other, and so that we could also like share with each other how some of these gender roles have impacted us. Because I also have very strong feelings that, you know, while there's context around the refugee experience in general, there's also a lot of other women of color in other communities that have played such a central, strong leadership role as the women in their family, and just how that, you know, have literally kind of like shaped, you know, the well-being of our community. And so props to all the women out there holding it down.
Yeah, honestly, being a girl is complicated and beautiful and all those things. What about you, Joy? What's one of the earliest memories when you realized you were a girl?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I grew up with my sister, so really my reference for being a girl came with hanging out with my guy cousins, because that's when I really understood the difference. At an early age of 5, I'm probably thinking maybe when we had to use the restroom, that's when we had to cover our eyes and just one person goes to the bathroom there, and then you're done. So that's when I realized, I was like, oh, okay, there's something different here. And then of course, like later on, it's just the typical things where you're told to act like one. So what is it? You're told to act like one, behave like one, or there's certain things that I couldn't do, or there were some unsaid rules that I had to follow, just to fit in line, to fit that gender role. And I think also just being able to show up. I think being a girl is like, once you figure out that's what it means to be a girl, it's like, now how do I support my family in that role? And a lot of it, like Lian touched on, does come in a lot of caretaking roles. Whether you're able to or not, it's definitely expected of you. So I would say there's a lot of pressures that you do feel to meet those standards culturally. And I think also at some given point too, being a girl also means contesting those boundaries, right? You're speaking up against that, and it sucks, like being that loud enough and saying, hey, I don't think this is fair, I don't think this is right. It may feel you're out of place, but I think at some given point, to do that is to also to understand that, hey, the context of gender roles is very unfair, and this is who I am, or this is what I think is fair. And anyways, I think that's what it is. And then I also just wanted to add to that. I think with my older sister's case, and having to be a buffer, being a buffer for a parent who maybe had some sort of trauma is also being a parent too. I feel like for young women, and like I said, I don't have a context to it with having a brother, but I'm sure just with the experiences that with my sister had, she also had to play a parent figure at an early age in places where my parents did not and could not, because they either had to work or they had health conditions or there wasn't a system in place for them to be able to access. So my sister definitely had to fill in those roles as a parent figure at an early age, and I'm talking about like in her early teen years. So that's what it is really being able to take care, but at the same time also knowing when there is like an unjust feeling of why is it just me, or like why can't I learn how to drive right now, why can't he, kind of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I love that you pointed out the whole big sister thing. I feel like that's a whole other experience. Just growing up, being a girl and being an older sister, it's a whole experience. Okay, so Lian, so how do you define organizing, and why do you think women make powerful organizers?
Yeah. So, well, organizing to me is building power with everyday people and getting them and moving their hearts and mind into action. And it's grounded in, just grounded in our everyday folks, and depending on our constituency, being able to kind of like build a base of folks who want to make a change in the community. And so I think it's as simple as that. And it could be, and then for me, like, women makes amazing organizer because we experience a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We experience stuff that, like, sometimes this is go over men's head, you know what I mean? So, and oftentimes, because women, have, because of our gender, have had to take so much crap, that we understand the nuance of then how to read people, how to move people, how to get stuff done. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So to me, like, some of those things make women just like primed to be great organizers. And then the other thing too is just like, oftentimes when we organize young women, we work with young people who are most impacted by the issues we're working on. And those are the folks who, at the end of the day, already know what the solutions that they need. So it's not somebody else trying to figure out a solution, but it's the people who are impacted by the issue that are shaping the solution. And that's what's really important, because it's also about power building and engagement, and actually having a solution that is right for the community. And oftentimes when other folks come into a community and try to tell a community what they need, it doesn't always connect. And it also undermines the leadership of folks in that community. And I think women have such a wide range of leadership skill, and there's so many different types of leadership skills that women carry. Women could be loud leader, soft leader, whatever. Like, I feel like women cover the spectrum. And I think women make just such really great organizer, because they're already an organizer, many of them, since they were born. They've been organizing their family. They've been organizing like all the stuff that's going on. And earlier, Diana, when you were saying that being the older sibling, you experience so many things. I'm the oldest daughter in my family. And I just remember how much I had to translate for my family, how much I had to organize them and the institutions that we're dealing with, either it's education, health, government, like all that stuff. And just how much, like, since we were young, because of the role and the responsibility that we play in our family. And I think, in particular, some of the oldest girl oftentimes have that additional burden because we're oftentimes the third parent. And so we're not just only organizing folks in our family, but we're also organizing the interaction around institutions that are impacting our family. And then also oftentimes you find that women and girls, like, they know everybody in the neighborhoods. So they know that neighbor, they know the other neighbor down the street, and they know everybody else. And those are the folks who are the best organizers because they can move people, right? So, and those are the folks that you want to find when you're base building, by the way.
So true. Yeah, I related to what Joy was mentioning about the older sister because I'm an older sister as well. And not until like maybe a year ago or two did I start realizing like I did a lot. I did a lot growing up. I did a lot more than what I think a regular like teenager, like preteen should have been doing, which again, I also was translating for my family. I was on the phone with doctors, with helping my parents with their taxes. And I'm like, I don't know what any of these words mean. I have no idea.
We were taught to not value all those skills, And so, but we're like, if we talk about all the things that women and young girls have done, and if we were actually paid for our labor, we would be doing really well right now. But labor, girls' labor are so undervalued, and everything that's in the home is not seen as real labor. And so that's why oftentimes our worth, we don't feel like women oftentimes are not being made to feel like what they do is worth something, and that our worth is underneath some of the men's labor. Because so much of what we do and the caretaking that we do are not seen as labor. And so this is where oftentimes you get also the internalized oppression of when women question their worth is because so much of what we've done in our past and how we grew up, we were not valued the way that we should have been. And so this is where we need to upset the setup around some of these things. And say, no, everything that we do is worth something. And in a capitalist society, it's not seen as, something that's worthwhile and that is, and of value. But this is where we could teach our young girls and young women who are growing up right now that everything that they do is worthwhile. And that everything that they put in and their energy and their effort is value, and we appreciate them for it.
Yes,
and this is
love this.
And this is how we also build very strong sisterhoods for all of us. Because oftentimes girls are being told that they need to be catty with each other and they're competing with each other. And so we got to shift that, right? So girls should be supporting each other and we should be building strong sisterhood. And we should be caring about each other because patriarchy is going to smack all of us if we don't. So.
I love it. Yes. Honestly, we accomplish so much more with sisterhood, Okay, so Joy, what about you? How would you define organizing? Why do you think women make powerful organizers?
What Lian was saying is definitely about building people power. It's taking back resources, land, time, and being able to understand the system of oppression. I think at the root of it is when you understand that power dynamic is also the source of injustice, that's when you can start to understand what to do to take that back, to take that power back. And also, just ditto what Lian had said around empowering the most impacted folks to speak to power, to lead, and also to organize. To answer the other question about why girls make really great organizers is because we are, in like the wheel of oppression, girls have to deal with patriarchy, sexism, racism, class. Girls of color have to deal with that, and even abilities too. And being able to see things in the background. A lot of the household stuff is seen as background work, things that doesn't really get noticed, but it is hard work. It is labor, and having that experience at the forefront and seeing what that is, what that feels like, how it means to show up with your families, and why you're showing up because of these unjust systems. Makes your perspective more clear on what it is that you're organizing and what it is that you're fighting for, whether it's fair wages, access to your most basic rights, whether it's safety nets for your family and community, whether it's what public safety actually looks like in your neighborhoods. I think girls too. I mean, when I brought up my older sister, they also, girls have a role of protecting their family in ways that doesn't take on a masculine or toxic masculinity lens. Girls are protecting and always caretaking for family members, and I think having that as an example of what safety looks like, of what it means to have someone who has your back, someone that really truly cares for you, is really the kind of world that we hope to envision. And I feel like we have seen examples in our lives, whether it's like our mothers or grandmothers or cousins, sisters, or even our coworkers too. I think having those models and role models in our life, I feel like we're able to create that world that we so long for, that we know is possible, that we don't see in the systems that we've inherited. So yeah. And girls are also, it also probably has how in some ways where girls can also express emotions. I think that has a huge role in why we also make good organizers, because we're in touch with our intuitive feelings, we're in touch with how we feel, and there's a danger when you're not able to do that, when boys are not able to do that, because there's a disconnect, and there's a violence, and there's a pathway to trauma and to continue that source of violence. So yeah, I think there's many nuances, and that could be one too. In how we're also able to express our feelings, our culture, our true selves, can also manifest in in how we're able to move people and understand people.
So I'm curious if either of you can think of a woman that you've witnessed who was a really powerful organizer. You both have had really incredible pathways to Khmer Girls in Action, working across the country, connections with other countries. Who is a woman? Can you think of a woman that you've witnessed as a powerful organizer? And what were some of the wins or some of the successes that she or the community experienced as a result? Who can you think back to? What happened? Who was she?
I'm just going to give a shout out. I really want to shout out Lian. And I do so because, like she was saying earlier, she was a youth organizer. She grew up, with the opportunity to change things in Oakland. And I'm just really grateful that we were able to have Lian bring that leadership to Long Beach and show our young people that taking back budgets, taking back money and resources is possible, and also offering leadership for a refugee community that a lot of families have been lost or separated, and just being able to show up in a way that feels authentic to her really means a lot. I really value that you're able to bring your knowledge and your skill sets to the org, and I definitely just want to uplift Lian.
That's Joy. That's so sweet. I feel like there's just a lot of women organizer, and to me, like, the most grounded for me are those who have came before us that have really set the tone on how organizing can be, and have built a foundation for us, to be strong, effective women organizers today. So to me, like, just a lot of, deep appreciation and shout out to many of our movement ancestors, like, Harriet Tubman, Grace Lee Boggs, all the folks who came before us, who just have really been a historical reference, past and recent, and have really kind of, I feel like, set the tone for all of us, and have been amazing role model, but also have really uplifted lessons for women in particular in the work, for us to kind of understand where we have to step up and where we could, and where we could step back as well. But I just really appreciate all that. And I think for me, like, I just met so many amazing women in my life, including, my mom, who have done so much for the family and have navigated a lot of craziness in her life, and have kept me alive. So shout out to my mama. But also to say that, like, when I was organizing in Southeast Asia and along the Asia Pacific Rim, women organizer are just really, really amazing. And the nuance of some of the framework in international, like, movement building and organizing, it's just very refreshing outside of the U.S. context. People operate so differently. So I also want to shout out to all these amazing international women that are just working in some of the craziest conditions that I've ever been exposed to, in the organizing context, and the type of danger that I feel like a lot of women are in, when misogyny, patriarchy, and imperialism, exists in kind of more of the international and global context, and just some of the danger that women face, because a lot of laws are not there to protect women and girls, and also they're vulnerable to trafficking. And so there's just a lot there, but I do want to say that despite the overwhelming kind of like context, some of these women and girls who are organizing under, they're just amazing human beings. And so I just wanted to do a general shout out, in the context of that, we're celebrating women, International Women and Women History Month, that go and show the women in your lives some love this month, and always, actually, all the time, not just this month. And give a lot of love, give a lot of appreciation, and show the women in your life that you care for them and that you are an ally to them and their issue.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I add one more to that?
Oh, yeah.
In light of that, and especially because we did talk about how women's work is not, a lot of times women don't occupy the public space and oftentimes don't get credit for the work that they do, is really just shouting out all the women behind the scenes, like holding down the household right now, protecting land, protecting water, really just holding it down in places that are super hyper militarized right now, still fighting for freedom. Like, those women, like, they'll never be on the front end. They'll never get the mic in that sense that we see typical, like, leaders, you could say, but those folks right now are holding it down, and I definitely do want to shout them out because that's every day. So yeah. So shout out to the mamas too, that are also doing like double, triple duty, holding down the household with kids being at home and doing homeschooling, like all of that.
The moms, the aunties, the grandmas, all of that. Yes. So we've just got a couple more questions for you. Wish we had more time. I'd love to know a little bit about some of the lessons that you, Joy, and Lian have learned on your journey working at KGA. I know that you've worked in, so many different spaces and communities. And how did some of those lessons impact your work today with women and girls? So what were some of those lessons and how did they impact you? And I also just want to shout out too, like, as I've gotten to know over this last year, women organizers with the Black Lives Matter movement, I've been blown away by just what it takes for women to be committed, for people to be committed, but how I've seen women being committed, even beyond if they're lucky enough to be employed in this work, but even beyond that, all the extra that they give. So, yeah, what have you all learned, and how does it impact you today?
So for me, it's a couple things. Some key lesson. Number one, building deep relationship is really important in our organizing work. Relationship with neighborhoods, with people, with the folks that you're doing work with is really important. And it's also a very important movement building muscle. Have meaningful relationship with each other. And having meaningful relationship with each other will help us solve problems, have courageous conversation with each other when things come up, and then also help us navigate the political climate better. And having deep relationship also help us strengthen our allyship and our solidarity with each other. So having that real deep relationship is a part of the organizing work. The other lesson is keep strong strategic focus on what it means to build power, and what that looks like, and what is kind of like the nuts and bolts to getting there. Because organizing is an art and a science. And so some formula works really well, in different contexts, but there's always kind of like just the nuts and bolts of organizing, the try and true stuff that will work and will help you build power with people. And there's always a lot of tools that emerge, new tools that will emerge. But at the end of the day, like, what are you doing to expand the pool and bring more people into the work and bring more folks into our organizing campaign and our membership and kind of like all the power building stuff. So that's really important. So keep your eyes on the prize around that. And then finally, I think I'll just go with 3. There's more, but let's stick with 3. So the third one I would say is that in a white supremacist capitalist system, this system worked because divide and conquer strategies have worked really well in this country. Something that is a very important movement lesson and organizing lesson is the importance of solidarity and multiracial organizing. So while we center and can center folks in times of crisis and really think about like our role in the larger racial hierarchy and all the crazy stuff that's going on in this country, because this country is built on genocide, forced labor, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Like hardcore violence. So to me, like being able to kind of both understand the history and just like how to break down some of these like divide and conquer strategy that have been put in place to uphold white supremacy and the capitalist system. And so to me, the concept of like multiracial organizing and organizing in solidarity and across communities of color is going to continue to be a very important movement strategy, continue to be a very important lesson that we can kind of learn and cultivate together. And because the key thing here is that if something pop off in one of our community, it's so important for us to be able to show up for each other, and so important for us to like have each other's back. And there's nothing more threatening to the power that be is when we come together and say we have each other's back, and you can't divide us, because no matter what happened in what community, because something will always be popping off at some point, that we all have each other's back. And I think that becomes a threat to the system. And that's a very important lesson that we should keep in mind, because history has shown us and taught us that lesson. And we should move forward and bring forth those lessons as we continue our organizing.
Yeah, ditto. And I think in addition to that, some of the lessons is really investing for young women and girls to also get understand technology in this digital age of organizing. It's very important to also invest and have have technology that's also built by the people for the people, because as we can see, like, corporate control and power is off the chains right now. And just being able to have the tool sets to navigate the online realm, because it was also built to exclude. It's also racially unjust. It's also built to exclude folks with different abilities to access. So I think that if we give if we give girls, if we give women the tools to organize, if we say that, like, they are and we are powerful organizers, this is organizing right now. It's this digital age that we've landed in COVID. To be able to mobilize folks remotely, to be able to mobilize folks, and still share and spread your message. That could even be like on communications tools, but there is like that lane to worry about, in the sense that many of the communications tools are owned by these corporations that play a role in how democracy unravels, and what is funded and what can be said. Even the whole concept of net neutrality was guided by folks with lots of money and power. So I would say just to have room for that, to understand that we're in an era of now of COVID, and understanding what public health will continue to look like, understanding what community spaces now look like, and what it means to reach people where you would typically knock on doors, but now you're either phone calling or texting. I think that just to give that some time and some resources for the folks who are on the ground, and who have the ability and the power to build power in that realm is quite important too.
So thank you both for this perspective and these lessons. I think you've given me lots to think about since I'm new to the organizing space. So that was awesome. One last question for you both. How can people show up in support of KGA and our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities?
Yeah, thank you all for that question. And I think given the recent context and what's been going on, some of the best way people could support is to donate to some of the grassroots organization in their local community that is working directly with community folks around some of these important issues. And so I would say find an API org in your community that is working directly in the neighborhood level, in the grassroots level, and donate some money and support them. The other thing is to, reach out and talk to folks and see what they need. So sometimes it's important to first understand the context before just showing up. And then let folks tell you where they might need the support, because it's going to be slightly different in different community, because the contexts are going to be different. And so just be understanding of that and checking in with people before randomly sometimes showing up, unless they're asking you to show up. And I think those are all really important. But I would say that, like, API community need a lot of resources right now. Oftentimes our narrative are underreported and are invisible in mainstream media. And when it does get picked up, oftentimes it gets picked up with the type of messaging that we don't have control over. And so, many organizations, progressive organizations, are pushing a certain type of messaging right now within this context. Help elevate those message, help elevate the message that is coming and framing from the ground, because oftentimes those are the messages that are not necessarily getting pushed in mainstream media, and show up and be in solidarity with each other. And I think that would be really helpful. API organization oftentimes also don't get the same type of philanthropic dollars, and so any fundraising or any support that could be given in monetary dollars right now is actually really crucial to folks.
If you go to GoFundMe, Stop AAPI Hate has a a good curated list of AAPI organizations on the ground. That could be a source for you in case you'd like to learn more or give through donation. The other ways are to KGA, we have a volunteer sign-up sheet on our website. So just go to our homepage and look for volunteer. We'll be doing some phone banking. So we would definitely love to build power with you. And then the other is, if you ever find yourself on social media, please feel encouraged to like, comment, share, bookmark, so that we keep that algorithm alive and also continue to build our online base. And yeah, I think that's it. And thanks so much for having us. This is really fun, and thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, we are just so honored to really set the stage for Radical AF, RAD AF, this new podcast, especially with you, Lian Chun and Joy Yenga from Khmer Girls in Action. Again, you can find them at kgalb.org, on Facebook or Twitter at kgalb, or Instagram at KGA Long Beach. And please do check out their site, see if you'd like to make a donation to the organization. And in closing, I'm reminded by this phrase that you can really judge the true measure of a society by how it treats its women and its girls. And while that could be a bit of a controversial phrase, I think it's really important for us to be thinking about how do we support each other as sisters, build a sisterhood, elevate women, support them, nurture them, because in the end, we as women are also really giving back and caring for our community and its future. So thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you to our amazing guests. You two are just really phenomenal. We hope maybe we can have you back in a year and do a revisit of this conversation, see how things are going in our community here. So thanks, ladies.
Thanks for tuning in to RAD AF, a podcast by Long Beach Forward. Check us out at longbeachforward.org, bringing you radical thoughts and radical people.